Hello, friends. Welcome back to a 1D10T Does Stuff, and I am the 1D10T in charge. And all of a sudden I can hear myself. Why is that? Oh, I'm pretty sure I know why. There we go. Cheese and crackers. Unprepared for stream. It's like it's my Monday. How's everybody doing? Glad you're all here. Welcome to the Tuesday stream. I'm Trevor Stewart 1308, the idiot in charge, who's obviously having some technical difficulties already. Today's stream is brought to you in association with The Hidden Leaf and Sky Mall VA on the Downtown Mall, 105 West Main Street. A great place to go with some great buds to get some great buds. Also, great place to go with some great buds to get some great buds. A bud, and the only thing better than their bud is their customer service. We're also brought to you in association with Kush Gang Snacks, available or findable on Instagram at KGSnacks434 and Firehouse Organics, spelled with a Z, findable on Instagram at Firehouse Organics, spelled with a Z. We've also picked up a new sponsor, Dope Ash Drinkables, available at the Hidden Leaf. Where are they available at? And other retail locations. I'll have to figure that one out. A note of disclaimer. I will be expressing opinions and we will be discussing sensitive topics throughout the show. In fact, that's pretty much what this show is today. And any of the opinions I discuss, or any of the opinions I express, any opinions expressed herein belong to the expressor of the opinion, myself, the channel, and or the parent company, but not necessarily any of our advertisers, including Hidden Leaf, Sky Mall VA, Kush Gang Snacks, Firehouse Organics, and Dope Ash Drinkables. Cheese and crackers. I got there, though. I got there. Obviously, I'm having a general Monday morning sort of day. So, before it gets any worse, let's move on and into today's topics. A bit of warning, we will be discussing racism and sexism as well as fat phobia. So if those topics are going to trigger you, please feel free to look away. However, if you are, and I would say specifically a white man, maybe challenge yourself not to look away so that we broaden your perspective here some. We will be reading from Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia by Sabrina Strings, specifically with an eye towards how this affects the health standards, the development of the health standards in the United States. And eventually we will be working our way to, and have done some work in previous streams on the racial and gender biases in the medical institutions in the United States. We are working our way towards discussing specifically the dangers Black women face in the mental, emotional, and behavioral health institutions, specifically in the United States. but currently we are working on getting background context for all of that. So just be aware, it's a serious stream. Not a lot of comedy. And usually if I make jokes, it's to lighten the mood. So sit back, find yourself somewhere, oh gosh, how does this go? Find yourself somewhere caffeinated to sit, find yourself something dank to drink, and find yourself something fluffy to smoke. And let's settle in and try and learn something from this book. Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia. And again, thank you everyone for being here. Pardon me. Ooh, that first hit had a hit in it. All right. We are in the chapter Thinness as American Exceptionalism, and we will be finishing this chapter today. That is my plan. Oh. Let me enlargenate that so you guys can read it too. There we go. We can all see the book now. I'm going to turn that down just a touch more. I do love this interview with James Comey on NPR. And I kind of like that Comey came back into the news recently.
People ought to look above their fights about policy and realize this presidency threatens something very fundamental that is above partisanship. And
this was almost 10 years ago, if you think about it. All right. Let's get on with it. As usual, I'm going to back up a paragraph to get a running start. We are currently dealing with eugenics in the United States, the sort of beginnings of eugenics in the United States in the early 20th century. Oh, goodness gracious. Hey, Chris, how you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Enjoy your lurk, sir. Oh. Looks like Brock got to the shout-out before me. Thank you, Brock. All right, so let's get into it. While politicians crafted anti-immigrant legislation and scientists generated studies on eugenic racial inheritance, artists and journalists also had their part to play. In the popular press, the question of racial and relatedly physical character of Americans loomed large. In the spirit of American exceptionalism, they embraced the country as a melting pot of morally upright, democratic, and forward-thinking peoples. Yet they were clear to specify which nations, races, and peoples contributed to this Arcadian melting pot. Those from Northern and Western Europe. with women commonly being used to represent the nation. The emerging face and figure of American exceptionalism as seen in mainstream art and media was the trim Nordic woman. By the turn of the century, the name Charles Dana Gibson would be synonymous with feminine loveliness. He was born in 1867 in the Roxbury section of Boston. At an early age, he quit New England for New York, enrolling in the prestigious Art Students League in 1883. A mere 3 years later, the young artist had one of his sketches published in Life magazine. In 1888, the tradition of a great many of great in the tradition of many great American artists and intellectuals, Gibson departed for Europe. In Paris, at the Academia Julian, he honed his craft and fine-tuned his artistic vision. In the 1890s, upon his return from Europe, his career as a draftsman took shape. It was during this decade that Gibson came up with a new icon of beauty, an image called the Gibson Girl. Like earlier American models, she was tall and graceful, but unlike earlier models, she was something of an athlete and an intellectual. The Gibson girl was frequently depicted in pastoral scenes riding a bike or playing golf. She might equally be shown on a chaise lounge poring over a pile of books, or seated at a table composing letters to acquaintances. A representation of the late century New Woman. The Gibson girl was commonly drawn with a chin aloft, skillfully undertaking one of many tasks demanded of the cultivated North American woman. Before the century was out, the Gibson girl would appear in multiple mainstream publications. What made the Gibson girl unique was that she gained widespread appeal in both the northern and southern parts of the United States. This was no mean feat. Although Louisiana-born Elizabeth Bisland had been a recognized beauty in the South who moved northward and continued to garner recognition for her looks, this was not necessarily a common trajectory. For decades, artists, journalists, and other self-styled beauty experts claimed that the different types of beauty were to be seen and appreciated in different regions of the country. Indeed, well into the 1890s, in the prominent Southern newspaper, the Atlanta Constitution, plump women were particularly those plump women, particularly those with the Venus's proportions, were celebrated. I'm pretty sure part of why this section got so much underlining and weight when I read it the first time was because I'd just seen a video about Gibson girls, and I believe it might have been, and I could be entirely wrong about who it was, might have been Kaz Rowe. I don't know, but I think it's something we might look into next week. We might take a break from reading next week and watch some videos. A chance for us to get our heads in a little different space from all the reading we've been doing. I only vaguely remember the video, so obviously I did not learn much from it. And maybe it would be helpful to watch it again. In an 1888 article bearing the headline, Women's Figure, Real and Ideal, the author describes the ideal woman's figure as that of Medicean Venus. This is not the Venus that was co-opted and retrofitted for Harper's. According to the author, the American version of the Greek ideal had the following measurements. Waist 23 inches or sometimes 24, bust 36 inches, occasionally 37, hip measure from 45 to 47. That is 23, 24, 23, 36, 45. Wow. It is a departure from what we've seen through a lot of this. Another article of the same year not a departure. We're starting to get to extreme proportions here, I think. Another article from the same year in the Atlanta Constitution describes the appeal of the voluptuous actress Lillian Russell, born in early 1860s. In her youth, Russell's beauty and talent were praised in many parts of the country. Over the years, however, she gained considerable weight. In the North, this apparently made her the subject of snide comments. In the South, however, her shapely classical figure was defended. Though New Yorkers speak of Lillian Russell's former beauty with a regretful sigh, the author states, her charm is yet potent to those seeing her face for the first time, for she still has, with the aid of electric lights, etc., the face of a child and the figure of a Venus. Ew. Hey, Jessamy Crystal. Happy Tuesday. That's okay. I understand completely. Much love. Happy Tuesday to you. In a later article, the author claimed that both class and race were what made the typically voluptuous Southern belle. Chew. In an 1895 article in the Atlanta an 1895 article in the Atlanta Constitution revealed the clear difference between the North and South in terms of race and aesthetics. In the highest type of our Southern beauty, the author intones, every one of the pretty Southern girls is of high social position and has been a reigning belle in her own section. This was not just class, but also racial lineage that generated the typically fleshy beauties in the region. Miss Sterling's beauty is of the rich Circassian bloodline. She is large and magnificently made. Yet the 1890s appeared to have been the turning point. By that time, even as many railed against the slender ideal and the voluptuous figures continued to be vaunted. There was a growing praise of slenderness in parts of the South. Key factors were, well, let me hold on and thank you. So, flour that has enough terpenes in it can, the terps can get up in your nose and make you sneeze. And that's what's been going on with this Jay, is that the terps have been making me sneeze. This batch of them have been pretty good, and that's one of the. If it can make you sneeze, it's good. Well, hello? Have I been dropping offline this whole time, or was that okay? I should be back. Sorry about that, everybody. I guess the internet dropped out for a moment. All right. I was just explaining terp nose to everybody. Well, that was a strange little interlude. All right. Key factors were, again, the immigration of stout Southern and Eastern Europeans and the growing relationship between Nordic Aryan heritage, slimness, and beauty. That is, even if immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe largely impacted the North, the South, too, by the early 1900s, would receive a high number of immigrants from the Russian Empire. This, combined with the greater circulation of newspaper articles by the end of the century, meant that the fear of immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe was stoked in the South as well as the North. This is white on white racism that we're seeing still. But in the context of the racial hierarchy that had been set up and the justifications for the racial hierarchy that had been set up at the time, there's still the blackness of the racism is basically going unsaid at the moment. Or the racism around blackness is going unsaid. And I mean, it is very vocal in the society, but around beauty standards at this level and health standards, it's more about proximity to the Nordic Aryan ideal and and blackness has been already at this point set up to be diametrically opposed to that. So if the most beautiful is considered to be the slim, athletic, Aryan Nordic woman, the other side of that is going to be a black woman, the other extreme. And that's yeah. I feel like we're gonna get there. I know we're gonna get there in this book. I know it. But I don't remember exactly when we get there. But we should remember that this is the version of white supremacy. This is the part of white supremacy where they're deciding what part of white is the most supreme. Yeah. And a large part of deciding that, I guess, has been who are the others who have been invading your area, your country, as you see it. And at the moment, it's the immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe. So, it is partially for these reasons that the Gibson Girl captured the American imagination when it did. For although voluptuousness had long been praised in the South, areas like Atlanta were starting to see a new appreciation for slimmer models. Even the author of The Highest Types of Our Southern Beauty, while praising the voluptuous Circassian figures, nevertheless described an Alabama woman as a slender and rather tall brunette with svelte figure, whose beauty in the most refined and aristocratic type is of the most refined and aristocratic type. Of a woman from Virginia he deemed rather small of perfect figure. The author noted, "The type is decidedly the American girl Gibson has made so familiar." The notation that idealized small and perfect figure of American women was captured by Gibson was seen in several articles in the paper. The notion that idealized small perfect figure. Okay. Cheese and crackers, Trev. Read the words that are there. An article from 1899 states Mr. Charles Dana Gibson first charmed the world with his original illustrations of a type of Americans and foreigners admire as the highest type of the American woman. Still another, written 3 years later, reminds the reader that the Gibson Girl was regarded as the acme of American beauty and refinement. What is often again, Trev, read the words that are there. What is often unappreciated about Gibson in his own take on the relationship between race and beauty, reproducing the notion of America as a melting pot of the superior races, Gibson believed that the refined and aristocratic air of the Gibson Girl had everything to do with her mixed Northern European heritage. I think this is what ties together this section about Gibson. What Zangwill calls the melting pot of the races has resulted in a certain character. They are beyond question the loveliest of all their sex. Evolution has selected the best things for preservation. Why should women not be beautiful increasingly? Why should it not be the fittest in form and features as well as mind and muscle which survive? And where should that fittest be in evidence most strikingly? In the United States, of course, where natural selection has been going on. As elsewhere, there has been a great variety to choose from. The eventual American woman will be even more beautiful than the woman of today. Her claims to that distinction will result from a fine combination of the best points of all those many races which have helped to make our population. Ew. Again, ew. The language of natural selection is certainly Galtonian, showing Gibson to be conversant with eugenic ideologies. Moreover, his description was indicative of the prevailing racial logic of Northern Europe, of Northern European superiority. For although he suggests that America is For although he suggests that America is as exceptional as a melting pot of the races, he does not mention all the races in the brew, preferring to name instead only the one he finds most important. The best part of her beauty will and has come from the nation of our origin, Great Britain. Describing the beautiful American woman as tall, trim, and first of Anglo-Saxon and later Nordic Aryan racial lineage had long been the norm in the North. By the turn of the 20th century, this point of view was being widely disseminated in mainstream publications, gaining popularity in other parts of the country, and quickly becoming recognized as the American beauty ideal. Odes to Charles Dana Gibson and his Belle Femme appeared routinely in the New York Times and Atlanta Constitution, but they were certainly not limited to these venues. Between 1895 and 1920, hundreds of references to the Gibson Girl appeared in publications such as the Chicago Tribune, the Washington Post, and even the Los Angeles Times. The Gibson Girl was drawn by the artist, represented the tall, trim American woman, foremost in his own words of British origin. To the extent that thinness was becoming a form of American exceptionalism, the artistic portrayals of the Gibson Girl in the mainstream media were integral to making this association. Gibson might have been rightfully heralded as an innovator of in hold on. Having a hard time with words today. Another sip of coffee and see if I can do this. Gibson might have been rightfully heralded as an innovator. Try that again, Trev. Gibson might have been rightfully heralded as an innovator in the field of feminine aesthetics. By the time of his 1910 interview, aha! I see what it was doing. Okay. That's why it was innovator. It's because I was reading interview below that. Thanks, Just Me Crystal. Thanks. But by the time of his 1910 interview with the New York Times, his type of girl was being overshadowed by purportedly newer models that nevertheless owed something to his inspiration. In a 1907 interview in the Times, for example, the artist M. Philip Beaulieu offers up his ideal beauty, one that seems very similar to Gibson's. In his study of the American beauty, he leans towards the blonde, with the tall, slender, nervous nature that is so great a promise and so alluringly different from any other type of woman in the world. In an article in the Times from 1911, in another article in the Times from 1911, yet another artist is credited with finding a new type of beauty. But this beauty is as described seems remarkably like one popularized by Gibson. The author of the article says the modern muse, Miss Rasmussen, is tall and slender, that the ideal American beauty should be somewhat of a cosmopolitan is evidenced by the fact that Miss Rasmussen's Americanism comes from a blend of Irish and Danish blood. Oops. By the 1920s, the silhouette of the Gibson girl was not enough. Writer Penryn Stanless reflected on the ideal of feminine beauty in 1923. He outright rejected what he saw as the frequently excessive size of real-life women inspired by Gibson's drawings. We, or at least our fathers, were all in love with the Gibson girl, with her broad shoulders and her tiny waist, who weighed from 110 to 175 pounds. No, we show a most decided preference for the girl whose waistline is about 24 or 26 inches, and who tips the scale at 110 to 120 pounds. Wow, this is apparently important bits here. The reference to the scale here is significant. Starting in 1891, public weighing scales started to appear in shops and in busy commercial districts. By 1913, scales made their entry into private homes. For the first time in history, weight-conscious Americans could quantify their thinness or corpulence. This is all very important. Many Americans were motivated by their physicians to find out their exact weight. This signaled a new front in the war on fat, one that was now waged in the field of medicine. For although doctors since the time of George Cheyenne had been telling corpulent people to lose weight for God, and race scientists had been urging elite white Americans to stay slim for country, medical science would, in the 20th century, step in and tell Americans to get trim for health reasons. Yet even in the medical fields, descriptions of the relationships between weight and health were not motivated exclusively by medical findings. The legacy of Protestant moralism and race science as it related to fat and thin persons loomed large. Indeed, many early to mid-20th century physicians relied on moral and racial logics to rail against persons deemed too fat or too thin. But over time, a growing number did so specifically and exclusively to condemn fatness. Obviously, that is an important paragraph. A lot of underlining going on there. Part 3 is Doctor's Way In, the next chapter, and we'll get to that in 2 weeks. I'm gonna try and remember to look up the videos on the Gibson girls in for next week, and look up the videos for the Gibson girls next week, and maybe some other videos as well. So I realize that it's been a relatively short episode today. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Just Me Crystal. Thank you, Darth Dragonis. Thank you, all you lurkers. Much love. stick around for the raid, and I'll see y'all next time. Now's the time on the show when I say, as they say around here, 2 up, 2 down, VA, double deuces. I'm out, y'all.